but I've been so thrilled to see and hear the contributions here from such a wide range of people. I've really found it absolutely tremendous, and thank you for all the feedback and people coming up to me, not just with positive feedback, but with points of fierce disagreement, as if the conversation was just continuing with the people on the panel. So thank you. I've found it enormously energizing, and I hope everyone else has too. Well, I'm going to say a few things by way of closing remarks. Now, absolutely not a summing up. The conversations that are going on here really are the summing up. But let me tell you a few of the things that have occurred to me and my colleagues and some of you that you've fed back to me as we've been talking throughout the day. And we started off with this question of, can we use multilateralism to fix the world's problems? And if we want to do that, what do we do about making it work better? Well, there was, it seems to me, no agreement at all here on whether it works well at the moment, or even, in one panel, whether it exists. And we had some powerful cases that the multilateral system, however you describe it, is broken or not working well for many, many countries. The Prime Minister of Yemen, Prime Minister Said, said it's not doing anything to solve the problems of real urgency for my country. I'm trying to keep the water flowing, trying to keep the lights on. We sort out, the United Nations and other abstract things later, but it's not solving my problems. We heard more positive voices around many of the sessions, and some came from the US. Kirk Campbell, the National Security Council, said, all right, maybe not the UN itself, with which the US, he didn't quite put it this way, but has always had an uneasy relationship, but we're finding success with minilaterals, patchworks, ecosystems of agreement. Those old phrases from the Iraq and Afghan war era of alliances of the willing and ink blots are now not phrases that he and his colleagues, or really many others, reach for. But the principle of finding areas of agreement between countries, between people and organizations that may not be comprehensive, but are still better than countries acting alone. That does take you some places, he argued, and quite a few people here agreed. I have to say, though, listening to him and quite a few other of the sessions, I did feel that the uncertainty about what to expect from the US itself and from its individual presidents that its political system may equip it with does hang over this discussion as it does over many. It is enormously hard to know what to expect from the US in every forum, and that matters because the US has been so integral to many of the rules and guidelines and institutions that we have used since the Second World War. Indeed, has identified itself with many of the values that underpin those. And so that has a particular resonance as we come close and closer to an American presidential election. There are some in these panels, I'm thinking of Martin Wolf, in the great powers discussion we had, who say, look, it's never worked very well in the purest sense of working well for all countries equally who are signed up to something or some institution. In fact, in that sense, he argued it hasn't existed. He did say, look, I personally, Martin Wolf, as he took pains to add, speaking for no government, certainly not the UK government, I sign up to many of the principles that underpin the order since the Second World War. I like those values, even those interests expressed of countries then. But then he twice took a big swipe at what he called the hypocrisy, particularly of the West, in purporting to be urging these values and principles and rules on the world, but often when it chooses individual countries or groups of countries not to follow them at all. And that theme of hypocrisy was picked up by others on that panel, and it was picked up in spades on Twitter, which got very, very excited and supportive of that point of the debate. We spent quite a bit of today talking about some of the very current problems, threats, things you might want to resolve in the world, and whether multilateralism was working well in those cases or really failing. And one of those, obviously, is Ukraine and Russia's invasion of it, one of the biggest challenges out there to any kind of international agreement. And with Julian Smith, US ambassador to NATO, asserting that, yes, look, NATO is unified. And we're coming up, obviously, to the NATO summit in Vilnius, just a couple of weeks away. But there was, can I say with understatement, a division on what was a very lively panel about Ukraine, and really fierce disagreement about a central question that we certainly didn't grapple with in that, but it is what is it for Ukraine to win? Does that mean every bit of land regained? And who and how is going to hold that decision, that discussion? Came to climate change a couple of times, at least, though it threaded through all kinds of conversations, as it absolutely properly should. There's another of these big tests. Can the international system in any sense work well? And we heard from Jennifer Morgan and Nancy Karagithu in the last session about some ways in which it could. But we also were up in that session, and others, against the prospect of the US versus China, and the question of whether discussions are almost futile if you cannot get those two countries to agree. And just referring back again to the session, the Great Powers session, we were left at the end of that with a spectacle of two countries economically deeply intertwined, but really proposing and espousing very different ways of organizing relations between people, and Martin Wolf again arguing that tension, opposition, rivalry was inevitable. Fierce debate, though, on that panel too, including from China's Ambassador Wu Hongbo. Economics came into the afternoon, but again it threads through everything. And the economics debate we had here with Raghuram Rajan, among others, turned into a debate on fairness or efficiency. What are you trying to do with multilateralism and these institutions? Are you trying to reallocate stuff? Are you trying to be fair, for example, with loss and damage arrangements, which we heard in the questions in the climate change discussion just now? Or are you trying to get something to work well, have a Security Council that really is effective, can come to a decision, and in a sense impose that on the world? And that conversation was not a particularly economic one, but it was very interesting to me for bringing out that, two different senses of what you might want to do with multilateralism. It didn't address the question that I put to you, in a sense, from Mark Carney right at the beginning. He's the chair of our panel of senior advisors, of who's going to pay for all this, and the amounts of money needed in the kinds of transitions that the world wants. He's dealing, obviously, particularly with the climate one, the clean energy one, are very large. So do multilateral organizations, including the financial institutions, but not just them, do they have any way of bringing about consensus on who is going to pay? And that's before even you get to national politics and whether politicians, particularly in democratic countries, can persuade their people that they should pay for one thing rather than another. And that is the political challenge of our time. And that brings us perhaps to James Cleverly, who started the conference this morning and started with this very bold appeal, saying, let's have a much more inclusive sense of these institutions. Let's put all kinds of countries who need a strong voice, deserve a strong voice by virtue of their size, their importance, which may not be the same thing as size, their success, their importance in all these conversations. Let's put them in the Security Council. He didn't answer, to my satisfaction, the question of how that would then work. including with whether you kept the veto. But he did offer an interesting answer when I put that to him, I thought, which was even the fact that a country vetoes something in public, as Russia was forced to do over Ukraine, is not nothing. There is a shaming in that, and there is a sense in which the world can demonstrate which side it supports. Others probed him in the questions on how other things would work, and he said to be continued, basically. And that is true of many of these discussions. It is to be continued. But it seems to me interesting, important even, that Britain is raising it. Britain is trying, as we heard in the very good Britain is at a middle power session, to work out what it is after Brexit. Does it have influence, which is not the same thing as power? Possibly. Some were scathing to me, and a lot of people who came up into the coffee break said, look, what's the point of a foreign secretary getting up and exhorting the UN Security Council to expand? This has been going on for ages, and what influence has Britain got on this? It can't force it to happen. Certainly can't force the US or any other individual country to let it happen. But it seems to me it can have influence, although it may take saying more than once. James cleverly raised, in a way, the purpose of multilateralism. And as I said to you, this is one of the interesting things that seemed to me to come out of the economics session in particular. What are you trying to do with it? You're trying to solve problems, or in some sense, you're trying to defend values, group together countries that share the same values and share the same purposes, if you like, and then reaffirm those and strengthen them in that alliance and in that sense of themselves. And our Sanam Vakil, who runs our Middle East program, said very interestingly in the Great Powers session, a lot of countries are looking at abandoning values, or not quite abandoning them, but setting them aside in pursuit of simply getting things done in a very pragmatic way. And she questioned whether that had, in a sense, gone too far. And I think that question does hang over the whole of the day's conversation. What are we trying to do with multilateralism? Are we trying to solve particular problems? Well, yes, in some cases, climate change, one of them, and to call it a problem is almost to understate it all. Or are we trying to assert values? And you could say, with Ukraine, we're trying to do both. We're trying to bring the resolution we want to the end of that, but we're also trying to assert a set of values on that. Now, we have about 5 minutes, not quite, before we go to the Chatham House Prize. So I wondered, we've got a couple of roving mics, and I would just take a couple of points. This is you don't often get this from the chair, but an invitation to make a comment, a brief comment, as opposed to a question. But if there are one or two people who'd like to say something about what they've taken from today, now is your moment. Great, and there's a microphone there. Who would like to be first? And my colleagues can see people. Right, there's one here in the front. Thank you.
I think...
would you like to say who you are?
Yes. My name is Maurizio Cuttin. I'm part of the CFC platform. Very thankful to be here and to be given the opportunity to raise this. When I came here today, I came with the thought of, when thinking about multilateralism, it's about dialogue. It's often what people think. It's often the very first thing that pops into people's minds. Leaving this conference, I think the intergenerational aspect is a key part of it. And it's a part that often doesn't get raised, but I think it's a part that is essential when we come to thinking about forging lasting alliances, lasting relationships, and also creating a better future for better generations.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And Britain, of course, is struggling with its own intergenerational conversation. You're talking about the Common Futures conversation, which is a project that Chatham House is so proud of striking up conversations between young people in Europe and Africa. The themes change all the time, and they're curated, and then the people keep on being alumni in a broader and broader kind of way. But I think you're absolutely right. We put a lot of effort into this, as we do into all our next generation work. And actually, Martin Wolf, on going out, said, I'm so impressed on the quality of the debate from the young people here and the range of those voices. And thank you all very much indeed for coming. One over here. But I can't see you, but I will hear you.
My name is Irina Yarmolenko. I am from Bucha and Irpin. I am a refugee, and at the same time an expert of local level rebuilding of our cities. And I would like to say that being here and understand how solidarity you are with Ukraine, how this question is tremendously impact all our planet, and how it influenced climate, how it influenced a lot of other spheres as a social spheres, how human we are with this. It gives us a lot of energy and braveness to do what we do in our country and abroad. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, I'll take one more. Here in the front. Have a brief one. We want to count down.
So I'm Crystal. I'm also from Common Futures Conversations. I'm originally from the Bahamas, and so I had little to no expectations coming here today. I know I was very interested in what James cleverly said. One of the things I grapple with a lot is exactly how the Caribbean fits into this international global order, especially because when James cleverly earlier mentioned getting more African states involved in the Security Council, I paid attention to the fact that he didn't, despite mentioning Mia Mottley, who's the Prime Minister of Barbados several times, he didn't once mention potentially getting Caribbean countries involved. So, but aside from that, I found it striking how, even though I never considered it before, actually the Caribbean plays a big role in multilateralism, especially in places like the United Nations, although our role is never recognized.
Thank you for that. And I do know quite a lot of people in the Foreign Office, not that far from James Cleverly's office, pay a lot of attention to what Mia Mottley tweets, including after James Cleverly's speeches. I haven't seen what she's tweeted. Right, with that, we are now going to the Chatham House Prize for 2023. This is an annual honour that Chatham House gives to the persons, organisation deemed to have made the most significant contribution to the improvement of international relations in the previous year. And it is voted on by Chatham House members out of a long list drawn up by Chatham House staff with some input from our council. And I'm delighted and honoured to say that this year it goes to the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, who I think is now joining us live from Kyiv. President Zelensky, we have given you this prize because of what you have done in response to the brutal and relentless onslaught on your country and the way you have united your nation and many, many others around the world in resistance to it and demonstrated a mastery of international diplomacy. President Zelensky has said to us, he's about to speak to us, but he has said that he is delighted to accept our award on behalf of the people of Ukraine, its citizens, and its defenders. Thank you and congratulations.
Great honor for me. Dear friends, I'm grateful for your attention to Ukraine and your respect for Ukraine. Ukrainian soldiers, all our beautiful people, really deserve the highest honors. Millions of our people fight and work for our freedom, our common freedom, Ukrainian and all free nations. And I'm sure that we will keep our freedom. And your reward in particular. The Chatham House Prize for Ukraine is another proof that the world believes in Ukraine, believes in Ukrainians, believes in our victory. Ladies and gentlemen, thousands and thousands of our warriors distinguished themselves in battles against the invaders. Today, my advisors prepared 3 new decrees on awarding state awards to our heroes, advanced to 419 of our warriors, men and women who are fighting for freedom with their blood, pain, loss of their brothers in arms. And I want you to know that every day we have success on the front line thanks to our heroic soldiers. And of course, thanks to the support of our partners. And the United Kingdom is one of the obvious leaders in this support. Thank you very much. Every day, our soldiers repel Russian assaults. Step by step, they liberate our land and people. Every day, we make Russian tyranny weaker, as it should be for our world to be safe. During the full-scale war, more than 49,000 of our soldiers are awarded with state awards for bravery in battles. And 245 soldiers are awarded with the title of the Hero of Ukraine. Imagine how intense the fighting is and how strong our people are. Such a number of well-deserved awards for special bravery and courage reflects the mass bravery and courage of Ukrainians. Please always support our people. They deserve it. And I believe that the day will come very, very soon when Ukrainian contribution to the global freedom and the strength of our people will be recognized by legitimate recognition of our state, an ally of your state and all free nations, NATO members. We must honestly admit peace in Europe is an alliance, so that the aggression against one or another European nation never repeats again, and so that such self-sacrifice of soldiers is never needed again. Security institutions, in particular Euro-Atlantic institutions, must really protect peace. And now it is real. Only together with Ukraine, which will be free, strong, and of course in NATO. Only together with our heroes. Glory to all Ukrainian heroes. Thank you again for this day, and thank you for your support. Thank you, United Kingdom. Slava Ukraini!
President Zelensky, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for taking the trouble to speak to us today. We're aware you have other things going on. Here to receive the award on your behalf is the Ambassador of Ukraine, Vadim Prishtaiko. Come here. You come. Thank you very much indeed. Great, thank you very much indeed. Great. heartfelt thanks to all my colleagues who helped with President Zelensky's office arrange the live link to Kyiv, which is not easy at any time, never mind in the middle of a counteroffensive. We now come to the end, and I just want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank everyone for their questions, the panelists for their energy, for their disagreement, which is very much what we value. And I want to thank the Chatham House team, a great team who have pulled all this together in constantly changing world events, constantly changing demands on our speakers, and they have really done the most tremendous job. So from me, but I think from all of us, thank you very much indeed to the team. And now, just 7 minutes after we promised, do come and join us for a drink.